My wife. The HR called me to a meeting with the CEO. Robert, after 15 years, we're restructuring your position, my wife announced smugly. Clean out your desk by Friday. I smiled politely and said, completely understand. They had no idea how. Monday would be fun. 15 years. That's how long I'd been grinding it out at Eastbridge Technologies, showing up every damn day like clockwork. 15 years of keeping my head down, delivering solid work, and being the guy everyone could count on when the servers crashed at 3 a.m. or when some hotshot client needed their custom software tweaked by yesterday. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, wasn't the type to schmooze at company happy hours, but I got things done. That had to count for something, right? Thursday morning started like any other. I was nursing my second cup of coffee, staring at lines of code that were starting to blur together when my phone buzzed. Myra's name flashed on the screen. My wife, calling from 3 floors up where she ruled the HR department like some kind of corporate queen. We'd been married for 12 years, and lately, things had been different. Colder. Like we were roommates who happened to share a mortgage and a last name. Robert. Her voice came through crisp and professional, the same tone she used with employees who'd screwed up their expense reports. The CEO wants to speak with you. Conference room B now. No, hey honey. Or how's your morning going? Just straight business. A knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Maybe it was about the new client integration I'd been working on. Maybe Jared finally realized how much value I brought to this place. I straightened my tie, grabbed my coffee mug, the one with the faded world's okayest programmer logo that Clara from accounting had given me last Christmas, and headed upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, each floor ding echoing in my chest like a countdown timer. Conference room B was one of those sterile corporate spaces with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the parking lot, a mahogany table that probably cost more than my car, and chairs that looked expensive but felt like sitting on cardboard. When I walked in, Mira was already there, perched at the far end of the table with her arms folded across her chest. She had that fake smile plastered on her face, the one she wore during company presentations when she had to deliver bad news about healthcare benefits or vacation policy changes. Across from her sat Jared Lang, our CEO, 40-something, perfectly groomed, the kind of guy who probably had his shirts pressed daily and never seemed to sweat even in July. He was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my presence until I cleared my throat. Robert, he said, finally looking up with those cold blue eyes that had probably crushed 1,000 dreams in boardrooms just like this one. Thanks for coming up. Have a seat. I pulled out a chair, the leather squeaking under my weight. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Mira was studying her manicured nails like they held the secrets of the universe. Jared was doing that thing where he steepled his fingers and tried to look thoughtful, but really just came off looking like a villain from some cheesy corporate thriller. So, Jared began, his voice carrying that fake warmth that executives learn in leadership seminars. After reviewing our current structure and future needs, we've decided to make some changes to your position. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my face neutral. 15 years of dealing with difficult clients and impossible deadlines had taught me how to keep my emotions in check. I nodded slowly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're restructuring the development team, he continued. And unfortunately, your role no longer fits with our new direction. We're looking for more dynamic leadership in that department. Dynamic leadership. Corporate speak for, we're replacing you with someone younger and cheaper. I glanced at Mira, looking for some sign of support, some indication that she'd fight for her own husband. Instead, she leaned forward with that smug expression I'd been seeing more and more at home. You'll need to clean out your desk by Friday, she said, her voice dripping with barely concealed satisfaction. We'll provide you with a standard severance package and excellent references, of course. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. My wife, the woman who'd promised to support me through thick and thin, had just helped orchestrate my professional execution. The CEO I'd worked my ass off for had just tossed me aside like yesterday's newspaper. But here's the thing they didn't know about me. I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 months. I stood up slowly, smoothed down my tie, and looked both of them in the eye. I completely understand, I said, my voice steady and calm. Thanks for the clarity. Jared looked surprised by my composed reaction. Myra's eyebrows shot up like she'd expected me to beg or break down crying. They were waiting for me to fall apart, to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I shook Jared's hand with a firm grip and gave Mira a polite nod. "I'll have everything wrapped up by Friday," I said. "Thanks for the opportunity to contribute to Eastbridge's success all these years." As I walked toward the door, I could feel their eyes on my back. They probably thought I was in shock, that the reality hadn't hit me yet. They had no idea that I'd been 3 steps ahead of them since the day I discovered their little secret. 3 months ago, I'd stumbled across something that changed everything. Something that made me realize my loyal, quiet, efficient approach to life had been setting me up for exactly this moment. So I'd started planning, started protecting myself, started building something they couldn't take away from me. They thought they were ending my story at Eastbridge. They had no clue they were actually writing the first chapter of their own downfall. The walk back to my office felt like the longest journey I'd ever taken, but I kept my face blank, my steps measured. I wasn't about to give anyone in this place the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that sickly corporate glow on everything, and I could feel eyes following me as I made my way through the maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices. News travels fast in a place like Eastbridge, especially bad news. By the time I sat down at my desk, my computer was already pinging with messages. Andre from the security team was the first to swing by, his massive frame filling my doorway like he was ready to throw hands with whoever had wronged me. "Yo, Rob, what the hell is going on?" he asked, keeping his voice low but his anger barely contained. "Word is you got canned." Before I could answer, Clara appeared beside him, her usually bright demeanor replaced with genuine concern. "This is bullshit," she whispered. "You built half the systems in this place." Emo and Yusuf weren't far behind, crowding around my desk like a protective circle. These weren't just co-workers. They were the people who'd had my back through countless late nights, impossible deadlines, and the kind of corporate chaos that would drive lesser teams insane. Yusuf looked particularly pissed, his jaw clenched tight as he processed what was happening. "They really did this to you?" Emo asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "After everything you've done for this company?" I leaned back in my chair, managing a small smile that seemed to confuse them. "Look, guys, don't worry about it. Sometimes these things happen for a reason." "What reason?" Andre demanded. "You're the most reliable person in this whole damn building. Trust me on this one," I said, keeping my tone light. "Everything's going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to." They exchanged glances, probably thinking I was in denial or having some kind of breakdown. I couldn't blame them. If I were in their shoes, watching a 15-year veteran get tossed out like garbage, I'd probably be just as confused by my calm reaction. The rest of the day dragged by in a blur of awkward encounters and whispered conversations. People I barely knew were suddenly stopping by to offer their condolences, like I was holding a wake for my career. Some seemed genuinely sorry. Others were just fishing for gossip to share at the water cooler. I played my part, accepting their sympathy with grace while internally counting down the hours until I could go home and start phase 2 of my plan. By 5:30, the office had mostly emptied out. I packed up a few personal items, my coffee mug, a picture of my parents, some technical manuals I'd bought with my own money, and headed home to face Mira. She was already in the kitchen when I walked through the front door, standing at the island with a glass of wine in her hand, and that victorious smirk I'd been seeing more and more lately. Our house suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. The open floor plan that had once felt modern and spacious now seemed cold and sterile, just like our marriage. "So," she said, taking a sip of her Chardonnay, "how did the rest of your day go?" "Fine," I replied, setting my box of personal items on the counter. "Just fine." She laughed, a sound that used to make me smile, but now just grated on my nerves. "You're taking this awfully well, Robert. I thought you might be more upset." "Why would I be upset?" I asked, opening the refrigerator to grab a beer. "You said it yourself. I'll land somewhere. Maybe something easier." "Exactly," she said, warming to the topic like she was giving a motivational speech. "You've worked enough. 15 years at one company. That's practically unheard of these days. This could be a blessing in disguise." A blessing in disguise. If she only knew how right she was, just not in the way she thought. I nodded along, playing the part of the defeated husband while she continued her victory lap. She talked about how this could be a fresh start for both of us, how maybe I could find something with better work-life balance, how we could finally take that European vacation we'd been talking about for years. All the while, I was thinking about the last 3 months, about the night that changed everything between us. It was a Tuesday in February when I came home early from a client meeting that had been canceled at the last minute. I'd planned to surprise Mira, maybe order some takeout from that Italian place she loved. Instead, I got the surprise of my life when I found her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a string of text messages filling the screen. Messages between her and Jared. Messages that made it crystal clear they'd been having an affair for months. Messages that detailed not just their physical relationship, but their plans to push me out of the company so they could be together without the awkwardness of having the betrayed husband around the office. That was the moment I realized my loyal, quiet, efficient approach to life had been setting me up to be screwed over by the two people I trusted most. But instead of confronting them, instead of causing a scene or filing for divorce right then and there, I did something smarter. I started planning. The next morning, I quietly formed Ironbridge Systems, registering it as an LLC under my name alone. I started carefully documenting all my original work, every algorithm I developed, every system improvement I designed. I reached out to patent attorneys, intellectual property lawyers, anyone who could help me protect what was rightfully mine. And then I started talking to Solvex Corp, Eastbridge's biggest competitor. Turns out, they'd been trying to poach me for years, and they were very interested in what I had to offer. 3 months of careful preparation. 3 months of playing the oblivious husband while building my escape route. 3 months of letting them think they held all the cards while I quietly stacked the deck in my favor. Now, as I watched Mira gloat over what she thought was my downfall, I couldn't help but smile. She thought she'd won the war, but the battle hadn't even started yet. They'd kicked me out thinking I'd walk away empty-handed, just another corporate casualty with nothing to show for 15 years of dedication. They had no idea I was walking away with the keys to their entire operation. Friday morning came with that crisp autumn air that makes you feel like anything's possible. I woke up before my alarm, feeling more energized than I had in months. Mira was still asleep beside me, probably dreaming about her new life with Jared, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. I slipped out of bed quietly, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and headed to Eastbridge for what everyone thought would be my final day. The building looked different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. 15 years of walking through those glass doors, riding those elevators, navigating those sterile hallways, and now I was about to close that chapter forever. But instead of feeling sad or nostalgic, I felt liberated. Like a prisoner who'd finally figured out how to pick the lock on his cell. My desk was exactly as I'd left it the day before. A few boxes sat nearby, courtesy of facilities management, ready to hold the remnants of my corporate life. I took my time packing up the last of my personal items, my engineering textbooks, a small plant Clara had given me last year, some awards I'd won that suddenly seemed meaningless. Each item went into the box with deliberate care, like I was performing some kind of ritual. Andre stopped by around 10, still looking pissed off about the whole situation. "This is so messed up, man. You want me to accidentally delete some files before you go?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I appreciate the loyalty, but that won't be necessary." Clara appeared with a card signed by half the development team and a gift certificate to my favorite restaurant. "We're going to miss having you around," she said, her eyes getting a little watery. "This place won't be the same without you. You guys are going to be just fine," I told her, meaning every word. Better than fine, actually. Mo and Yusuf came by together, both looking like they wanted to say something but weren't sure how to put it into words. Finally, Yusuf spoke up. "If you need references or recommendations, anything at all, you know we've got your back." "Always," Mo added. "We know what kind of worker you are, what kind of person you are. Anyone would be lucky to have you on their team." Their loyalty meant everything to me, and I made a mental note to remember this moment when the time came to extend job offers. These were good people, the kind you wanted in your corner when things got tough. Around noon, I finished packing the last box. My desk looked strange without all my personal touches, just a generic workspace that could belong to anyone. I sat there for a moment, taking it all in. 15 years compressed into 3 cardboard boxes and a few digital files. It should have felt depressing, but instead, it felt like shedding old skin. I pulled out my personal laptop and opened up my Gmail account. The corporate email would be shut down within hours, but I had something important to say, and I wanted to make sure it came from me, not from some sterile company account that would disappear into the digital void. The email was short, but I spent a good 10 minutes crafting it. Every word had to be perfect. To those who've always had my back, I typed, thinking about Andre's protective anger, Clara's genuine kindness, Mo and Yusuf's unwavering support, and all the other good people who'd made this place bearable over the years. Watch what happens Monday. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it, the moment of no return. Once I sent this email, there would be no going back, no pretending everything was fine, no more playing the role of the loyal company man who'd been screwed over and was walking away quietly. With respect, Robert. I hit send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it a promise I fully intended to keep. By Monday morning, everyone would understand exactly what Eastbridge had lost when they decided to push me out. They'd realize that firing the guy who built their core systems wasn't just cruel. It was stupid beyond belief. I closed the laptop, picked up my boxes, and walked out of that office for what I genuinely believed would be the last time. The elevator ride down felt different than it had on Thursday. Then, I'd been going up to face my execution. Now, I was descending toward my resurrection. That evening, I drove across town to meet Keisha Tran at a coffee shop in the Arts District. Keisha was Solvex's VP of Strategic Partnerships, a sharp woman in her 40s who'd built her reputation by identifying talent and turning it into competitive advantage. We'd been talking for weeks, but tonight was when we'd finalize everything. "Robert," she said, standing up to shake my hand as I approached her corner table. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I replied honestly, ready to move forward. She smiled, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. "Then let's make this official." The documents inside were everything we discussed and more. Solvex would acquire Ironbridge Systems for a sum that made my severance package look like lunch money. I'd be installed as head of development with full creative control over my team and projects. Most importantly, we'd launch our new product upgrade, built around the proprietary algorithms I'd protected, within 6 months. "There's one more thing," Keisha said as I signed the final page. "We've been monitoring Eastbridge's client satisfaction scores. They're going to have some serious problems next week when their core systems start acting up." I looked up from the documents. "Acting up how?" "Well," she said with a knowing smile. "It turns out that when you remove the guy who designed and maintained your entire data processing infrastructure, things tend to break down pretty quickly, especially when that infrastructure was built around proprietary code that legally belongs to someone else now." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about me getting a new job or even about revenge. This was about justice, corporate justice delivered with surgical precision. "Monday's going to be interesting," I said. "Monday's going to be legendary," Keisha replied. We shook hands on it, and I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like a completely different person than the guy who'd cleaned out his desk that morning. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the loyal employee who'd been betrayed by his wife and boss. I was the architect of their destruction, and the blueprint was already in motion. Monday morning, I woke up with the kind of anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a kid on Christmas morning. The sun was streaming through the bedroom windows, casting everything in golden light, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about what the day would bring. Mira was already up and gone, probably rushing to the office to start her new life as the CEO's girlfriend without having to worry about her pesky husband hanging around. I took my time getting ready, brewing a perfect cup of coffee and actually enjoy. Around 8:30, I settled into my home office with my laptop and a fresh cup of joe, ready to watch the fireworks begin. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:47 a.m., according to the timestamp on the first frantic email I received, Eastbridge Technologies experienced what their IT department would later describe as a catastrophic system failure. The real-time data processing platform, the backbone of everything they did for their biggest clients, simply stopped working. Not crashed, not glitched, stopped. As in, legally no longer theirs to use. See, here's what Jared and Mira didn't understand about the software business. When you fire the guy who designed your core systems, you better make damn sure you actually own those systems. Turns out, The proprietary algorithms I developed over the years, the ones that made Eastbridge's platform faster and more reliable than their competitors, were protected under my personal patents. Patents I'd filed and paid for myself, thinking I was being a good corporate citizen by improving the company's capabilities. Those patents had just been transferred to Ironbridge Systems, and Ironbridge Systems had just been acquired by Solvex Corporation, which meant Eastbridge was suddenly using technology they had no legal right to use. My phone started buzzing around 9 o'clock. Text messages from Andre, Clara, and the gang, all variations of "holy shit, what's happening here?" The customer support lines were apparently lighting up like a Christmas tree, with angry clients demanding to know why their data feeds had gone dark. At 9:23, my phone rang. Myra's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. Then again. On the fourth call, I finally picked up. "Did you do something?" Her voice was sharp, panicked, all pretense of corporate professionalism gone. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone perfectly calm. "How's your Monday going?" "Don't play games with me, Robert. The entire system is down. Clients are screaming. Jared's having a meltdown. Did you sabotage something before you left?" I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "Sabotage? Mira, I'm hurt. You know I'd never do anything unethical." "Then what?" "What I did," I interrupted, "was protect my intellectual property. You know, the algorithms and improvements I developed over 15 years? The ones that made your boyfriend's company successful? Turns out, I actually own those. Legally. With patents and everything." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she processed what this meant. "You can't do this," she finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. Now she just sounded scared. "Actually, I can. And I did. Don't worry, though. I gave your legal team plenty to read this week. They'll figure it out eventually." I hung up before she could respond, feeling better than I had in months. At exactly 10 a.m., Solvex's press release went live across every major business news platform and industry blog. I'd helped Keisha craft the headline myself. Solvex acquires Ironbridge Systems, led by former Eastbridge senior architect Robert Garland. The announcement was perfectly worded, professional but devastating. It highlighted my 15 years of experience, my role in developing industry-leading data processing solutions, and my new position as head of development at Solvex. Between the lines, anyone in the tech industry could read the real story. Eastbridge had just lost their core technology and their best developer to their biggest competitor. My laptop was open to Google News, refreshing every few minutes to watch the story spread. TechCrunch picked it up first, then Wired, then the Wall Street Journal. Each article was more damaging than the last, with industry analysts weighing in on what this meant for Eastbridge's future. "This appears to be a significant strategic blunder," one expert told Reuters. "When you're built around proprietary technology, you don't fire the person who created that technology unless you're absolutely certain you own it." Another analyst was even bluntier. Eastbridge just handed their competitive advantage to Solvex on a silver platter. "I can't remember seeing a more catastrophic personnel decision in recent memory." By noon, every tech blog and business publication was running some version of the same story. The headlines were brutal. Why did Eastbridge let go of the man who built their future? CEO Jared Lang's blunder sparks investor crisis. From hero to zero, how Eastbridge lost its edge in 1 week. The comment sections were even worse, filled with industry insiders sharing their own stories about corporate incompetence and short-sighted management decisions. Eastbridge had become a cautionary tale, a perfect example of how not to treat your key employees. Around 2 o'clock, Andre texted me a screenshot from the company's internal Slack channel. Messages were flying fast and furious, with employees openly questioning management's competence and speculating about layoffs. The mood had shifted from confusion to anger to full-blown panic in less than 6 hours. "Dude," Andre's message read, "it's like watching the Titanic sink in real time. Jared called an all-hands meeting for this afternoon, but half the dev team is already updating their LinkedIn profiles." I poured myself a celebratory beer and settled back in my chair. This was better than I'd even hoped. Not only had I protected my own interests, but I'd exposed Eastbridge's leadership for what they really were. Incompetent, unethical, and completely unprepared for the consequences of their actions. The best part? This was just the beginning. By the time I was done, Jared and Mira would understand exactly what it meant to underestimate the quiet guy in the corner office. By noon on Monday, it was like watching a slow-motion car crash from the best seat in the house. Every tech blog, industry newsletter, and business publication was running with the story, and the headlines kept getting more savage by the hour. I was camped out in my home office, refreshing news feeds and social media like it was my full-time job, which I guess it kind of was now. TechCrunch led with the $50 million mistake, how Eastbridge lost its crown jewel. VentureBeat went with when corporate politics backfire, a case study in self-destruction. But my personal favorite came from a smaller industry blog, How to Tank Your Company in 5 Easy Steps, an Eastbridge tutorial. The comments sections were absolutely brutal. Industry veterans were sharing war stories about incompetent management. Startup founders were using it as a teaching moment about intellectual property protection, and competitors were barely hiding their glee at Eastbridge's misfortune. It was like watching a digital feeding frenzy, and I had front row seats. Around 12:30, my phone started buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Journalists, probably, looking for quotes from the man at the center of the storm. I let them all go to voicemail. This story was telling itself just fine without my commentary. But at 1:15, a call came through that I absolutely had to take. Carla Martinez, Myra's assistant, and one of the few genuinely nice people left at Eastbridge. Her voice was shaking when I picked up. "Robert, thank God you answered," she said, sounding like she was on the verge of tears. "I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I had to warn you. It's complete chaos here." "Warn me about what?" I asked, though I could guess. "She's blaming Jared for everything. Telling anyone who'll listen that firing you was his idea, that she tried to talk him out of it. And Jared's doing the same thing in reverse, saying it was all her call, that he barely knew about the decision." I almost felt sorry for Carla, caught in the middle of their blame game. Almost. Sounds like they're handling it with their usual professionalism. "It's worse than that," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard Jared on a conference call with the board this morning. He was screaming, actually screaming, about legal liability and how the lawyers should have caught this. And Myra's been locked in her office making phone calls all day. I think she's trying to spin this with reporters." That was interesting. Mira always did think she was smarter than everyone else, but taking on the media when your company was imploding? That was either brilliant or suicidal, and I was betting on the latter. "Thanks for the heads up, Carla," I said. "And hey, if things get too crazy over there, you've got my number." By 2 p.m., the story had evolved beyond just business news. CNN was running segments about workplace loyalty and corporate betrayal. LinkedIn was flooded with think pieces about intellectual property rights and employee protections. Someone had even started a hashtag don't pull an Eastbridge. But the real entertainment started when my old team began reaching out. Andre was first, calling around 2:30 with barely contained excitement. "Bro, you've got to see what's happening in here. It's like a zombie apocalypse, but instead of brains, everyone's eating each other's careers." "That bad, huh?" "Worse. Half the management team is in emergency meetings. The other half is updating their resumes. And get this, 3 different headhunters have already called me today asking about my experience with Robert Garland's systems. Your name is like a golden ticket right now." Clara called next, sounding amazed and a little worried. "Robert, I keep seeing your name everywhere online. Are you okay? This is insane." "I'm fine, Clara. Better than fine, actually. How are you holding up over there? Honestly, I've never seen anything like this. The phones haven't stopped ringing with angry clients, and nobody seems to know how to fix anything without you here. It's like they suddenly realized they fired the only person who actually understood how everything worked." Mo and Yusuf called together, putting me on speakerphone from what sounded like a supply closet. "Dude," Mo said, "this is legendary. I mean, I feel bad for the company and all, but watching Jared and Mira scramble is kind of satisfying after what they did to you. Any word on how they're planning to fix the technical issues?" I asked. Yusuf laughed bitterly. "They brought in some hotshot consulting firm from Silicon Valley. These guys are charging $5,000 a day to basically tell them they're screwed without access to your algorithms. It's like watching someone pay premium prices to have a doctor confirm they've been shot." As the afternoon wore on, the calls kept coming. Not just from my old team, but from people throughout the company who'd always respected my work. They were all telling variations of the same story. Eastbridge was in full panic mode, with leadership pointing fingers at each other while the ship took on water. Around 4 p.m., I got the call I'd been waiting for. Gina Rodriguez from the QA team, someone I'd worked closely with on several major projects. Her voice was excited, almost giddy. "Robert, I don't know if you're taking calls, but I had to reach out. I just got off a meeting where they're talking about bringing in an entire new development team to rebuild everything from scratch. They're looking at months of work and millions of dollars just to get back to where they were last week." "Sounds expensive," I said. "That's not even the best part. Word is spreading that Solvex is actively recruiting from our team. I've had 3 people ask me if I know anyone over there, and I may have mentioned that I worked closely with their new head of development on several successful projects." The pieces were falling into place exactly as I'd hoped. Not only was Eastbridge hemorrhaging clients and credibility, but they were about to lose their best remaining talent to their biggest competitor. It was like watching dominoes fall, each one perfectly positioned to knock down the next. "Gina," I said, "if you're interested in exploring new opportunities, I might know someone who's looking for experienced QA professionals." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Send me your resume tonight. I think you'd be a perfect fit for what we're building." By the time I hung up, I had a list of 7 people from my old team who were ready to jump ship. 7 talented professionals who were tired of corporate politics and incompetent leadership, ready to work for a company that actually valued their contributions. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a complete corporate transplant, and the patient wasn't going to survive the operation. Tuesday morning came with a crisp October chill that felt like the universe was matching the cold reality setting in over at Eastbridge. I was sipping my coffee and scrolling through the latest news coverage when my phone buzzed with a text from Yusuf. He was still technically employed there, but from what I could tell, nobody was doing much actual work anymore. Everyone was too busy watching the corporate equivalent of the Hindenburg going down in flames. "Emergency board meeting called for 10 a.m., his message read. "Heard from Carla that 3 board members flew in from the West Coast last night." This is going to be biblical. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that familiar surge of satisfaction. An emergency board meeting less than 48 hours after the system crash? That was the sound of chickens coming home to roost. In my experience, when boards called emergency meetings, heads were about to roll, and I had a pretty good idea whose necks were on the chopping block. The beauty of still having friends on the inside was getting real-time updates on the carnage. Around 9:30, Andre sent me a photo from the lobby. 3 men in expensive suits looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, flanked by what appeared to be lawyers carrying briefcases thick enough to contain divorce papers for a billionaire. "The cavalry has arrived," his text said, "and they do not look happy." At 10:15, Clara managed to sneak me a voice message from the bathroom down the hall from the main conference room. "You can hear Jared's voice through the walls," she whispered. "He's getting loud. Like, really loud." Security's standing outside the door, looking nervous. I had to admit, part of me wished I could be a fly on the wall for this particular meeting. After 15 years of watching Jared coast on other people's work while taking credit for every success, seeing him finally get called to account was probably better than Christmas morning. The group chat that Yusuf had set up with some of the old team was buzzing with updates throughout the morning. Mo reported seeing Mira rushing toward the conference room with a stack of documents, looking like she was preparing for war. Gina mentioned that the phones in HR had been ringing non-stop since Monday, with employees asking about severance packages and job placement assistance. But the real bombshell came around 11:30, when Carla sent me a direct message that made me nearly spit out my coffee. "They're asking Jared to step down," she wrote. "I heard it through the door when I brought in water." One of the board members said something about catastrophic leadership failure and irreparable damage to shareholder value. He was shouting back that it wasn't his fault, that he was misled by his HR department. So Jared was throwing Mira under the bus. That was predictable. When cornered, guys like him always looked for someone else to blame. The question was whether Mira had seen it coming and prepared her own defense, or if she was about to get steamrolled by the same corporate machine she'd helped weaponize against me. I didn't have to wait long for an answer. At 12:10, Andre sent another update. Mira just stormed out of the conference room looking like she wanted to murder someone. She went straight to her office and slammed the door so hard that people 3 floors down probably felt it. 20 minutes later, Yusuf confirmed what I'd already suspected. Official word from facilities. Myra's been suspended pending investigation. Security escorted her out through the back entrance. She was on her phone the whole time, probably calling lawyers. By 1 p.m., the dominoes were falling faster than I could track them. The emergency board meeting had turned into a full-scale corporate purge, with 3 senior executives resigning to pursue other opportunities. Corporate speak for, "We're firing you before you can make this any worse." The official press release went out at 2:30 p.m., and it was a masterpiece of corporate damage control. Eastbridge announced that CEO Jared Lang had decided to step down to focus on new ventures, while several senior leadership positions were being restructured to better serve clients and stakeholders in the evolving technology landscape. Translation: We fired everyone responsible for this disaster, and we're hoping you'll forget this ever happened. But the tech industry has a long memory, especially when it comes to spectacular failures. Within hours, LinkedIn was flooded with posts dissecting what had gone wrong at Eastbridge. Industry analysts were calling it a case study in how not to manage talent and intellectual property. Someone had even created a Wikipedia page titled The Eastbridge Collapse, with a timeline of events that read like a corporate thriller. The coup de grace came around 4 p.m., when TechCrunch published an expose titled Inside the Eastbridge Meltdown: How an Affair and Corporate Politics Destroyed a Tech Giant. Someone, probably a disgruntled employee with access to company emails, had leaked details about Jared and Myra's relationship, complete with timestamps showing when their affair had started and how it had influenced the decision to push me out. The article painted a picture of a company led by people more interested in their personal drama than their professional responsibilities. It detailed how they'd fired their most valuable technical asset to cover up an affair, then watched helplessly as their entire business model collapsed without the systems I'd built. Reading that article felt like watching justice being served with a side of public humiliation. For 15 years, I'd watched Jared take credit for innovations I'd created while Mira played corporate politics behind the scenes. Now the whole world could see exactly what kind of leaders they really were. My phone rang around 5 p.m. It was Keisha from Solvex, and she sounded positively gleeful. "Have you been watching the news?" she asked. Hard to look away, I replied. It's like a train wreck in slow motion. A very profitable train wreck. We've had 12 major clients reach out since yesterday, asking about transitioning from Eastbridge to our platform. And that's just the beginning. Word is spreading that we've got the original architect of their system leading our development team. It was better than I'd dared to hope. Not only had Eastbridge lost their leadership and credibility, but their clients were actively seeking alternatives. And those alternatives were coming straight to us, with me as the selling point. "Oh, and Robert," Keisha added, "we've had 17 resumes come in today from current and former Eastbridge employees, all mentioning your name as a reference. I think you're about to get your dream team back together." As I hung up the phone, I realized this wasn't just about getting revenge on 2 people who'd betrayed me. It was about something bigger, about building something better from the ashes of their inn. 3 weeks into my new life at Solvex, I woke up every morning actually looking forward to going to work. That might sound like something every motivational poster in America claims is possible, but after 15 years of corporate politics and backstabbing, I'd honestly forgotten what it felt like to be excited about my job. Now, instead of dreading the commute to a sterile office building where I was just another cog in someone else's machine, I was heading to a place where my ideas mattered, where innovation was encouraged, and where I wasn't constantly watching my back for the next betrayal. The Solvex headquarters was a world apart from Eastbridge's corporate fortress. Instead of gray cubicles and fluorescent lighting, we had open collaborative spaces with natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Instead of conference rooms named after dead executives, we had creative zones with whiteboards covering every wall and comfortable seating that actually encouraged brainstorming. It was like the difference between a prison and a playground for adults who happened to love technology. But the real difference wasn't the fancy office space, it was the people. One by one, my old team had made the jump from the sinking ship that was Eastbridge to the rocket ship that Solvex was becoming. Andre had been the first to officially join us, bringing his cybersecurity expertise and his infectious enthusiasm for solving complex problems. Clara followed a week later, excited about the chance to work on projects that wouldn't be micromanaged to death by executives who didn't understand the first thing about software development. Mo and Yusuf came as a package deal, which was perfect since they'd always worked best as a team anyway. Gina brought her quality assurance skills and her talent for finding bugs that everyone else missed. Even Carla had reached out, tired of being caught in the middle of corporate drama and eager to work for a company that treated people like human beings instead of disposable resources. Working with them again felt like putting on a favorite sweater that you'd forgotten you owned. We had that rare chemistry that you can't manufacture or force, the kind of professional synchronicity that comes from years of shared challenges and mutual respect. We could communicate in half sentences and finish each other's thoughts when we were deep in problem-solving mode. More importantly, we trusted each other completely, which meant we could take risks and push boundaries without worrying about someone throwing us under the bus if things didn't work out perfectly. The freedom Keisha and the Solvex leadership team gave us was intoxicating. Instead of having to justify every design decision to managers who'd never written a line of code in their lives, we were empowered to innovate. When I proposed rebuilding our core architecture from the ground up using cutting-edge machine learning algorithms, they didn't ask for 17 PowerPoint presentations and a feasibility study. They asked how much time I needed and what resources would help us move faster. We were building new features in half the time it used to take us at Eastbridge, partly because we weren't bogged down in bureaucratic nonsense, but mostly because we were actually motivated to do our best work. When you're not constantly looking over your shoulder, when you're not worried about office politics derailing your projects, when you know your contributions are valued and your ideas are heard, that's when the magic happens. Clara summed it up perfectly one afternoon when we were taking a break from a particularly intense coding session. We were sitting in the company's rooftop garden, eating lunch and watching the city spread out below us like a circuit board come to life. "You seem different," she said, studying my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Lighter somehow." I thought about that for a moment, watching the clouds drift past the downtown skyline. "You know what? I think you're right." "Because I am," she said with a grin. "No more lies, no more corporate masks, no more pretending everything's fine when it's obviously not. This is what work is supposed to feel like." She was absolutely right. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. I wasn't second-guessing every interaction, wondering who was plotting against me or what office politics were happening behind closed doors. I could just focus on what I'd always loved most, building innovative solutions to complex problems with people I genuinely respected and enjoyed working with. The personal side of my life was changing too. About 6 weeks after starting at Solvex, I met Sasha Richardson at a business networking event that I'd actually attended voluntarily instead of being dragged there by corporate obligation. She was a management consultant who specialized in helping companies navigate major transitions, and she had this refreshing directness that I found incredibly attractive after years of dealing with people who never said what they actually meant. Unlike Mira, who'd always been impressed by titles and corporate ladder climbing, Sasha was drawn to authenticity and integrity. She didn't care that I was the head of development at some tech company. She cared that I'd had the courage to stand up for myself when I was being treated unfairly, and that I'd turned a potentially devastating betrayal into an opportunity to build something better. Our first few dates were unlike anything I'd experienced during my marriage. Instead of going through the motions of a relationship that had become more business partnership than romantic connection, I found myself actually excited to spend time with someone who challenged me intellectually and supported me emotionally without any hidden agendas. "I admire how you handled everything," Sasha told me over dinner at a small Italian restaurant that didn't require reservations or pretentious conversations about wine pairings. "A lot of people would have gotten bitter or vindictive, but you channeled that energy into creating something positive." That insight meant more to me than she probably realized. For months, I'd been worried that my carefully orchestrated response to Mira and Jared's betrayal made me somehow vindictive or petty. But Sasha helped me see it differently. I hadn't destroyed their careers out of spite. I'd simply protected my own work and built a better future for myself and the people who'd always supported me. This was what I'd been missing all those years at Eastbridge, the simple satisfaction of being valued for who I actually was, rather than what role I played in someone else's corporate chess game. 3 weeks after the corporate earthquake that had leveled Eastbridge's leadership, I thought the worst of the public spectacle was behind us. I was wrong. Sometimes the aftershocks are more devastating than the original disaster. And what happened next proved that karma has a twisted sense of timing and an even more twisted sense of humor. I was in my new office at Solvex, reviewing code architecture with Andre and Clara, when my phone started buzzing with news alerts. The first one made me pause mid-sentence. Anonymous whistleblower exposes Eastbridge leadership scandal. The second one made me sit down. Leaked emails reveal affair behind tech giant's collapse. By the third alert, I was opening my laptop to see what fresh hell had been unleashed on my former employers. The story broke simultaneously across every major tech publication, business journal, and even mainstream news outlets. Someone with access to Eastbridge's internal email servers had leaked a treasure trove of communications between Mira and Jared, spanning nearly 8 months. These weren't just your garden-variety office flirtations or professional discussions that crossed personal boundaries. These were explicit, damning exchanges that laid bare their entire scheme to push me out of the company so they could pursue their relationship without the awkwardness of having the betrayed husband around the office. The leaked emails read like a corporate thriller written by someone with a particularly dark imagination. There were messages from Jared complaining about how my moral presence made him uncomfortable during executive meetings. There were responses from Mira strategizing about how to document performance issues that didn't actually exist, creating a paper trail to justify my eventual termination. Most damaging of all were the exchanges where they explicitly discussed timing my firing to coincide with a major client presentation, ensuring I'd be gone before anyone realized how much institutional knowledge was walking out the door with me. But the emails that really caught the media's attention were the personal ones. Messages where they mocked my work ethic, calling me a corporate drone and a code monkey who didn't understand the bigger picture. Exchanges where they fantasized about their future together once they'd cleared the deck of inconvenient obstacles like, well, me. There was even a particularly charming thread where Mira referred to our marriage as a placeholder arrangement that had outlived its usefulness. Reading those messages felt like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car was my entire life up to that point, and the crash had been orchestrated by the two people I'd trusted most. The casual cruelty of their language, the calculated nature of their planning, the complete lack of respect for 15 years of marriage and professional dedication. It was all there in black and white, preserved forever in the digital record. The media response was swift and merciless. TechCrunch led with the smoking gun, how corporate adultery destroyed a tech empire. The Wall Street Journal, typically more reserved, went with ethics crisis at Eastbridge. Leaked communications reveal leadership misconduct. But my personal favorite came from a smaller industry blog that simply titled their coverage, How Not to Ruin Your Company, a masterclass in self-destruction. The comment sections exploded with industry professionals sharing their own stories of corporate betrayal and workplace politics gone wrong. LinkedIn became a battleground of think pieces about professional ethics, with business leaders using Eastbridge as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing personal relationships with corporate decision-making. Someone even started a hashtag Eastbridge Scandal, that trended for 3 straight days. Within 48 hours, Eastbridge's stock price had plummeted another 30%, wiping out what little shareholder value had survived the initial technical crisis. Major clients who'd been on the fence about switching to competitors suddenly found the decision much easier to make. Who wants to do business with a company whose leadership had been exposed as manipulative, unprofessional, and fundamentally untrustworthy? The personal fallout for Mira and Jared was even more devastating than the corporate consequences. Jared, who'd already been forced to step down as CEO, now found himself unemployable in the tech industry. Every job interview, every networking event, every professional opportunity was overshadowed by the scandal. He'd gone from being a respected executive to being the poster child for corporate misconduct in less than a month. Myra's situation was somehow worse. At least Jared could potentially rebuild his reputation in a different industry or a different city. But Myra's role as head of HR made her actions even more inexcusable in the eyes of the business community. She'd weaponized her position to eliminate a personal inconvenience, using corporate policies and procedures as tools of personal revenge. No company with any sense would ever trust her with personnel decisions again. I watched her attempt to launch a consulting firm called Strategic Human Resources Solutions crash and burn in real time. The website went live on a Tuesday morning and was taken down by Thursday afternoon after the comment sections filled with links to the leaked emails and warnings about her professional conduct. 3 different business publications ran exposés about her failed startup attempt, turning what should have been a fresh beginning into another public humiliation. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, they'd plotted to erase me from the corporate landscape, to push me out quietly and move on with their lives as if I'd never existed. Instead, their own actions had made them unemployable pariahs while elevating me to a position of respect and influence I'd never imagined possible. A journalist from Forbes reached out, wanting to interview me about the lessons other professionals could learn from the situation. I declined politely but firmly. This wasn't about revenge or vindication anymore. It was about moving forward and building something positive from the wreckage of their poor decisions. Besides, the story was telling itself just fine without my commentary. Sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't retaliation. It's simply letting the truth speak for itself while you focus on building a better future. 1 year later, I found myself standing backstage at the Marriott Grand Ballroom in downtown Chicago, adjusting my tie and trying to process how dramatically my life had changed. The National Software Innovators Summit was the kind of event I used to attend as a spectator, sitting in the back rows while industry leaders shared their insights from stages that seemed impossibly far away. Now, I was about to be one of those leaders, addressing an audience of over 800 software professionals, startup founders, and tech executives. The irony wasn't lost on me. 12 months ago, I'd been the guy Mira would drag to these conferences so she could network and schmooze while I quietly absorbed knowledge from the presentations. She'd introduce me as my husband. He's in tech, like I was some kind of generic IT support rather than the architect behind systems that powered million-dollar operations. I'd gotten used to being an afterthought at industry events, the plus one who was tolerated but not particularly valued. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was the keynote speaker. The transformation had been gradual but undeniable. What started as a desperate attempt to protect my intellectual property had evolved into something much bigger. Ironbridge Solvex wasn't just another tech company competing for market share. We'd become a case study in how to turn corporate betrayal into competitive advantage. Business schools were teaching courses about our rapid rise. Industry analysts were calling our story the comeback of the decade. And somehow, I'd become the face of resilience in the face of professional adversity. The speaking invitation had come 6 months earlier from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the summit's organizing committee chair. She'd called it an opportunity to share your journey with the next generation of innovators. But I knew what she really meant. People wanted to hear how someone could get screwed over by their own company and somehow emerge stronger on the other side. I'd spent weeks preparing my presentation, but not in the way most speakers probably did. Instead of focusing on technical achievements or business metrics, I decided to talk about something more fundamental: the importance of knowing your own worth and refusing to let others define your value. Walking onto that stage felt like stepping into a different version of myself. The spotlight was bright but not blinding, and as I looked out at the sea of faces, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete confidence in my right to be exactly where I was. Sometimes the people closest to you will sabotage you. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. They'll undermine your contributions, question your value, and try to convince you that you're not as important as you think you are. The audience was quiet, attentive. I could see people leaning forward in their seats, recognizing something familiar in what I was describing. When that happens, I continued, you have a choice. You can internalize their assessment and begin to doubt yourself. You can fight them using their own tactics, becoming bitter and vindictive. Or you can do something much more powerful. You can prove them wrong by building something better. I talked about the importance of protecting your intellectual property, not just from a legal standpoint, but from a personal one. I shared the lessons I'd learned about the difference between loyalty and self-respect, about the danger of confusing professional dedication with personal worth. Most importantly, I talked about the freedom that comes from knowing that your value isn't dependent on other people's recognition or approval. If you know who you are and what you bring to the table, I said, building toward my conclusion, then other people's attempts to diminish you become irrelevant. They can fire you, betray you, try to erase your contributions, but they can't take away your ability to create, to innovate, to build something meaningful. The applause when I finished was thunderous, but more than that, it felt genuine. During the Q&A session that followed, person after person stood up to share their own stories of workplace betrayal, corporate politics, and professional redemption. A young developer from Seattle talked about being pushed out of a startup by investors who wanted to bring in their own team. A woman from Austin described how her ideas were stolen by a male colleague who got promoted based on her work. An older programmer from Boston shared his experience of being forced into early retirement by executives who thought his experience was less valuable than younger employees' enthusiasm. What struck me most was that none of them seemed bitter or defeated. Instead, they were energized, inspired by the possibility that setbacks could become setups for something better. That's when I realized the real impact of what had happened to me over the past year. It wasn't just about my personal vindication or professional success. It was about proving that integrity and competence could triumph over politics and manipulation. As I walked off that stage, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before everything fell apart with Mira and Jared. Genuine pride in who I'd become and what I'd accomplished. Not because I'd destroyed my enemies, but because I'd refused to be destroyed by them. 2 years after walking out of Eastbridge Technologies for what I thought would be the last time, I've discovered something that no amount of corporate success or public vindication could have taught me. True victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about becoming someone they can no longer touch. My life now bears almost no resemblance to the existence I was living when Mira and Jared thought they could erase me from their story. I wake up each morning in a house I actually chose, not one we bought, because it was in the right school district or would impress the right people. The walls are filled with books I want to read, art that speaks to me, and pictures of people who genuinely care about my well-being rather than what I can do for their careers. My mornings have become sacred time. Instead of rushing through coffee and email while mentally preparing for another day of corporate warfare, I take my time. I read the news if I want to, or ignore it if I don't. I work on personal projects that challenge me intellectually without being tied to quarterly profit margins or board presentations. Sometimes I just sit on my back deck and watch the sunrise, marveling at how quiet my mind has become. Work, when I choose to do it, is exactly that, a choice. Ironbridge Solvex has grown beyond anything I imagined when I first registered the company name out of desperate self-preservation. We're not just competing with our former employers anymore. We're setting industry standards, pioneering innovations that other companies scramble to copy. The mentorship program we launched 6 months ago has already helped dozens of young developers protect their work and avoid the kind of exploitation I experienced. There's something deeply satisfying about turning personal pain into systematic change. But perhaps the most significant transformation has been in how I approach relationships, both professional and personal. Sasha and I moved in together last spring, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm sharing space with someone who sees my success as something to celebrate rather than something to compete with or control. She's building her own consulting practice, helping companies navigate the kind of leadership transitions that destroy places like Eastbridge, and we support each other's ambitions without needing to merge our identities. The contrast with my marriage to Mira couldn't be more stark. Where Mira and I had fallen into a pattern of strategic partnerships and carefully negotiated compromises, Sasha and I have built something based on genuine compatibility and mutual respect. We argue sometimes, but about real things, like whether to renovate the kitchen or take a vacation to Greece, not about corporate politics or whose career should take priority. I saw Mira once, about 6 months ago, at a networking event downtown. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The polished corporate executive who used to command rooms and intimidate subordinates had been replaced by someone who looked diminished, uncertain. She was standing alone near the registration table, clutching a business card for some freelance HR consulting venture that clearly wasn't going well. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I saw something like panic flash across her face. Maybe she was afraid I'd make a scene, or worried that my presence would somehow damage whatever fragile professional relationships she was trying to rebuild. but I felt nothing except a mild curiosity about how different we'd both become. I walked past her without stopping, not out of cruelty, but because there simply wasn't anything left to say. The anger I'd carried for months after discovering her betrayal had long since burned away, replaced by something much more powerful: complete indifference to her opinion of me or her assessment of my worth. That moment crystallized something I'd been learning gradually over the past 2 years. I hadn't won because I'd destroyed her career or exposed her unethical behavior. I'd won because I'd built a life where her presence or absence was irrelevant to my happiness or success. The old Robert, the one who'd spent 15 years seeking approval and trying to be the perfect employee, perfect husband, perfect corporate citizen, would have needed her acknowledgement of wrongdoing or her admission that she'd made a mistake. The new Robert understood that other people's recognition of your value is nice to have, but not necessary to possess. Peace, I've discovered, is the ultimate power move. Not the aggressive, performance-based peace that comes from proving you're right and everyone else is wrong, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are regardless of external validation. When you reach that point, the people who once seemed capable of destroying your life become just characters in a story you've already finished writing. Iron Bridge Solvex will continue to grow and innovate. The mentorship program will help more people avoid the traps I fell into. Sasha and